Right, so Keir Starmer's cluelessness when it comes to warfare is positively scary. But when it comes to the matter of Russia and Ukraine, it is a particular concern when Starmer had already been stopped from handing Storm Shadow long-range missiles over to his Ukrainian counterpart Zelensky, while telling him they could use them against targets inside Russia once. He's now apparently had to be told again. This second occasion has come about as a result of Ukraine apparently begging Starmer to be allowed to use this ordnance to strike Russia. Apparently they've milked his ego so much that they've told him that such an action could turn the tide of the war, and so Starmer again has seemingly reiterated that he has no issues with the missiles being used against internal Russian targets. The trouble is, Keith, you don't get to make that decision as a NATO member on your own. And of all people to block Starmer's stupidity, which would no doubt paint a big fat target on the UK for Russia, well within Russia's reach as we are, it's Genocide Joe Biden that has stepped in to stop him. Right, so what's gone on here this time then, Damo? Well, you might recall, not so long ago, Keir Starmer wrapping up some of our Storm Shadow missiles for Ukraine with a big shiny bow on them, so to speak, and told Zelensky at the time that if he wanted to use them on Russian targets within Russia's borders, he had no problem with that. That was okay with him. It then had to be pointed out to Keith that starting World War III was probably not a good idea, that such an action would be construed as a direct strike by a NATO country on Russia, would prove all of Putin's fears about NATO eastward expansionism right, and being in the firing line for Russia ourselves here in the UK, we'd probably cop it quite personally. And for as much as Zelensky might want boots on the ground and NATO involvement, it is anything but a good idea. Well, it would appear that Zelensky's bunch have asked for permission to target Russia again, pleading to be allowed to do so, it would seem, saying it would turn the tide of the war for them. Yeah, I suppose it would really, wouldn't it? It'd turn Russia's firepower on us instead. I really don't understand why Starmer is so keen to wind Putin up and place the UK in his sights, unless it's a case of Starmer already having a bunker somewhere with his name on it and balls to the rest of us. At any rate, once more it seems Starmer has said he has no problem with it, and it has been for others to step in and say, actually, we do have a problem with it. You can't do this on your own, Keith. And when that someone happens to be the same guy helping Israel raise Gaza to the ground with his own arms supplying, it doesn't say a lot for Starmer's military acumen at all. Genocide Joe Biden has been the voice of reason here. He's been the sensible one, stepping in to stop Starmer. Here's an excerpt from the Daily Wrap's coverage of this story. As reported by the Ukrainian Pravda portal, the US blocked the UK's consent for Kiev to use Storm Shadow missiles against Russia. The probable cause is Joe Biden's fear of a potential conflict escalation. Sources cited by the British media claim that the matter is stuck in their US system and the discussions are ongoing. The UK had no objections to allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles freely. However, the British government's consent alone is not enough. Approval from the USA, France and a third NATO country is also required. Storm Shadow missiles have a range of 250 kilometres and can be used to attack Russian military targets located deep within the country, such as military bases, which the Ukrainian portal claims play a key role in Moscow's attacks. The USA's hesitation may be due to President Joe Biden's concern about escalating the conflict. Sabrina Singh, a Pentagon spokeswoman, admitted during a recent briefing that the USA fears escalation when using long-range missiles. She also suggested that these missiles are not essential for Ukraine to reclaim its territories. So for as much as Starmer might be nonchalant about allowing Ukraine to use weapons we've given them directly against Russian targets capable of reaching them, it turns out there are rules preventing such actions amongst NATO countries, with 3 other NATO states having to give permission, 2 of whom in this instance being the USA and France. So tough luck, Keith. This is above your pay grade to act independently over. On top of that, even more embarrassingly, the Pentagon is of the view such long-range ordnance is completely unnecessary, though of course Ukraine might well disagree with that too. In fact, we know Ukraine is thinking otherwise, because despite being given these weapons to use in other ways, despite Starmer committing £3 billion of our money per year to Ukraine for as long as it takes, whilst telling all of us there's no money to stop starving kids or freezing pensioners, Zelensky, he's had the brass neck today to say leadership in the UK where Ukraine is concerned has slowed down. Yeah, Zelensky's not getting enough out of us anymore, apparently. We're not acquiescing to his whims on what he can do with weapons we're giving him. He is begging to use these missiles directly against Russia. Not my words, but the words of the Tory graph today. And since he's now been told no, apparently that means we clearly don't like him as much anymore. People of Gaza right now, I'm sure, would love to have got 1/10% of what Zelensky has had off of us. Fat chance they ever get that. But no, he's the one being wronged here. He's going without. He's finding it tough to get by. You know what's even worse than that, though? The ignorance being spread on social media, demanding the UK and US let Zelensky use our weapons to strike directly against Russia. I had no idea until I read into it. There were so many people tired of breathing in this country, but of course, not all of them might well be living in this country. As an example, Matt Mueller, who appears to be based in the US, wrote, "This is frankly an indefensible and idiotic policy. The Biden administration needs to finally authorize the use of all weapons, including long-range missiles, on military targets inside of Russia. Ukraine needs to take out Russian airfields to protect their troops and civilians." There are many other accounts on social media opining the same things, often with Ukraine flags in their bios. Such actions, though, would expand the war onto those nations who supplied the weapons. What you call for is expansion of the war. But perhaps you are so pro-Ukraine, regardless of consequence, nothing short of exactly what Zelensky wants is good enough for you. Boris Johnson has joined in another unwelcome voice calling for all of this as well. Well, he certainly owes Zelensky plenty for providing him with a hidey hole every time he got exposed for his own incompetence and wrongdoing whilst he was PM, so not a great surprise, I suppose. But if that doesn't tell you this is the wrong message, being on the same side as Bozo the Clown on this matter, you haven't learned much from his time in power. None of this ultimately leads to bringing about an end in the atrocities there. But much like Israel happens to be a convenient staging ground and ally in the Middle East for Western interests like the US and the UK, so is Ukraine likewise, following a US-instigated coup, a handy staging ground for them on Putin's doorstep. Both situations need to be dealt with the same way, with sanctions, with humanitarian peacekeeping efforts, with conversations and diplomacy, not through the supply of more weapons which just drag these conflicts out for longer. Ultimately, where common sense goes by the wayside as far as Israel goes, as far as arming them goes, it's dead easy when you're siding with the oppressor there against oppressed Gaza. It's not so easy when you're pretending to be on the side of right there and siding with right in Russia and Ukraine when the oppressor has as many, if not more, big guns to bear as you do. And ultimately, a firefight, an ongoing war, isn't going to solve matters. The Starmer doesn't see Russia as an issue here. It's disturbing. It is even more obviously disturbing when Biden has to step in to stop him doing something we may all end up regretting here in the UK, for it seems the second time. Starmer's lack of awareness of the potential consequences for this country are terrifying. Because if our weapons are permitted to be used directly against Russia on their territory, all bets will be off as to when Putin would revisit that upon us. Look at what Israel has just done to Iran, and them shaking in their boots now, worrying about what Iran's going to do to them. Why would Starmer put us in the same position? There are too many people in positions of power who are completely stupid. That might not be a shock to many people watching this, but being lethally stupid, as Starmer seems potentially to be, is unforgivable. And frankly, he needs to be asked, he needs to tell us in an interview why he thinks Ukraine should be allowed to use our long-range missiles in such a manner, and why he thinks there wouldn't be any consequences for us in return if he let them do that. I'd love to know his answer. Meanwhile, Starmer's sense of priorities with regards to sending more military aid to Ukraine were already highlighted as sorely lacking last month. Well, there's more austerity for everyone here in the UK, paying a price for him to parade around on the world stage and cosplay in the dressing up box, as all that amounted to is detailed in this video recommendation here as your potential next watch if you so desire. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.